Hi, welcome once again to bne IntelliNews. My name is Aris. I'm the editor-in-chief, and we are going to today start what I hope will turn into a series of what we want to call bneReporter, where we talk to our correspondents in the fields in the various hotspots about what's going on. Today, we're going to talk to Anand Tumurtogoo, who's our Mongolian correspondent in Ulaanbaatar. And as you probably are aware, there has been a huge crisis has erupted. We're now in the sixth day or seventh day of
10th
demonstrations.
day.
10th day, right, there you go.
Yeah,
Time flies when
yeah.
Christmas is coming. Where there's been huge demonstrations erupted after some $12 billion worth of coal appears to have been stolen by officials. And the people have come out onto the square to demand an accountability. They want people to go to jail to get that money back. And then it's turned into more broad anti-government protests where people are complaining about the quality of life, the endemic corruption, and things have not moved on. And something we're going to talk to Anand about, there's a huge amount of maybe $1 trillion worth of minerals under the ground in Mongolia, and yet it remains one of the poorest countries in the world. And traditional, nomadic lifestyle. Ulaanbaatar has changed in recent years. However, it still remains a very backward place. So, Anand, welcome, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So let's dive straight in. I mean, we're in the 10th day of demonstrations. This is probably the biggest political crisis that Mongolia has faced in its short history through the last 30 years. And the people are very angry and they're not going away. What's going on at the moment? Are they still demonstrating on the main square?
Yes, there are still demonstrators on the main square, but not as many as on the second day and the subsequent few days afterwards. But they're still demonstrating, and now um, as the demonstrations have subsided actually,
So
and the government.
how many people are we talking about? Because it last weekend it got up to several thousand, and then there was that footage of people trying to tear down the gates to the I think it was the government offices. Is it just a couple of hundred now, or what's going on?
Yes, it's probably less than 100. I haven't been to the square today, and I haven't looked into how many people are there today at the moment. But yesterday there was just a very few, like maybe less than 100 or so
But people are still very
people.
angry. I mean, this issue is not going away.
Yes, this issue isn't going away. The biggest thing that the people actually demanded was that they wanted equality, basically, that the country is in a very unequal state where, again, a lot of people reiterated that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, and a lot of small business owners have complained that they've been working and toiling, and they don't see any kind of like progression towards into a middle class. They're paying their bills to loan, and they see there's no like benefit into doing business in Mongolia for small businesses unless you're involved in politics and find a way to, I guess, embezzle or like steal a lot of funds from the government.
So let's dive into some of the details. We're talking about $12 billion, which is an enormous amount of money.
Yeah.
It pales in comparison. Even in Ukraine, Kolomoisky, he stole $5 billion from his bank, which at the time was also a massive amount of money. But this is off the scale, particularly for such a small country. And from reading your reports, what I understand happened was that this contracts, 9 contracts, I think, are an issue here,
hmm
were signed with the Chinese, and the coal was sent, sold, but then the money just disappeared. And is this just like a huge government scam?
So the nine contracts are basically construction or infrastructure projects between 2019 till 2020 for the biggest coal mine in Mongolia, Idnis Town Totla, and all those contracts have been uh, classified. Now that they declassified it, and what the numbers basically show is that these contracts and these projects seems to uh, is kind of they spent more than they should have, basically. That some analysts have pointed out that the constructions, similar constructions in China, would cost 3 times less for the railroad construction that was just recently opened in September. And for the billions of dollars, that's the thing. Uh, Today, the cabinet secretariat came out and stated that this number is actually false. That Mongolia has actually made a profit from the coals from 2011 till 2020 of this year in November, that we made around the similar number of similar quantity of profits in USD. So he's basically squashing all the talks about this amount of money was stolen, and he's saying he told that the amount that was stolen was maybe like a portion of this, like 1% of this
Okay.
amount, basically.
But it's not clear. I mean, some money has been stolen, and the corruption is an issue. It's, maybe
It
the
is. It is. It is. That the biggest issue with the corruption is that it's very hard to actually look into it and then fact check it, or to see if the numbers are correct. And I
Mm,
mentioned in my interview with Al Jazeera that all of the information in Mongolia, they're classified. That
mm.
they've been classifying even the smallest of information that were used to be public. And because of that, a lot of the NGOs and civil rights organizations and journalists
Mhm.
can't do their jobs. They have to go on the words of the politicians, basically.
But the government's now backtracking, and I was reading that they're now doing daily briefings, and they've now
Yes.
declassified all this information, and they also rescinded the NDAs, the non-disclosure agreements, so that they're going to make all of this stuff public. So, is there going to be some scrutiny now? Are you going to be able to check what actually happened?
That's very hard to say, because there's other numbers that need to be accounted for, and that's also very hard to check. And you need a big team, and Mongolian media organizations are not very well equipped to fact check these kind of things.
Mm.
And if they can, it's really good. And I don't know, uh, the few contracts are to me is just like is almost like a how can I say, like a bait and switch almost, that they're just giving out a tossing a bone, and some of the information that we actually need might not be there, that we can see that, oh, this actually happened, and then we can actually counter check with other
Because this
sources.
goes right to the very top. I mean, you were writing that there was a deputy that actually brought this question up in 2018, and then it's also involved the head of customs, who's just quit as soon as the scandal broke. But then the deals, the contracts, they were signed off by the National Security Council, and that
Mm,
included the ex-president, the ex-speaker of the parliament, the ex-prime minister, and the current president was also involved in that decision then. And when the deputy was asking the general prosecutor about this, he was told that statute of limitations have expired, that case is closed. So,
yes.
to what extent does this go to the very top in the Mongolian government, and to what extent have the government been trying to cover this up from the get-go?
So, just today, the cabinet secretariat, no, I'm sorry, the the Independent Authority Against Corruption, so the anti-corruption agency in Mongolia, named 17 people that they're investigating, basically. And all of these 17 people, they named the former president and two of his staff members, and seven seven current parliamentarians, and of four, I think, yes, uh, four officials from the South Gobi province region. And then they're trying to they're basically saying that all of this corruption scandal happened within the South Gobi province, and the corruption scandal was within the local mining, the coal mining region, and and had some kind of sliver of involvement with the bigger Town mines, but they're not giving a full lot of information, and these information when I look at it, it just implicates the opposing party
Mm.
in government,
So,
the
so what's your
Democratic
feeling
Party.
then? I mean, this corruption, you've got a corruption investigation agency that's now in action. What's your feeling
Yes.
to the extent that this is actually a serious attempt to find out what happened, and to what extent do you think that they're going to protect the tops and look for scapegoats? And you're already suggesting that this is being politicized and that the ruling
Yeah.
party is using it in order to smear the opposition party, and so there's just a blame game going on here. What's your feeling?
So I think these people that they named probably are involved in some way, but they're still trying to, in my feeling, that paint a broader picture of showing that the Democratic Party and the former president is the big evil in all of this. And to me, like when they try to focus on the issue of the coal theft, they're moving away from all the things that the protesters have talked about. Again, the inequality. They're just shifting the narrative basically in what their talking points should be, or what kind of things they should address basically.
Yeah,
And
because I saw the president on the square giving that speech where he got booed off, but he was saying
yeah,
like we're with you and we have the same interests in heart, and the crowd are just not buying it. They're saying no, you belong to the elite, and we're the
yeah,
poor taxpayers that you're bleeding for cash. I mean, is that the case?
yes, that is the case basically.
And where does it go from here? I mean, the crowds have diminished, but all said and done, Mongolia, for all its corruption, remains a relatively democratic country within our space. It doesn't have that Soviet legacy, and there are elections. I mean, the EBRD used to big it up as like one of the more bright spots as far as politics are concerned. Is there a possibility the government's going to fall? That there's going to be elections? Is that a solution?
Uh, a lot of people are suggesting that the parliament should dissolve, and then the government also should dissolve, and the presidency also should step down. Uh, uh, but at the end of the day, who would we choose to run the government, or who would we nominate to be in parliament again? And all these people are basically career politicians who know the game, and all the people who are involved are basically businessmen. And there's just I don't know what solutions the government can do. At the moment, the only solution that I see is that the government become more transparent in everything they do, because that is the big issue that we had, is that they've been pointing fingers at basically at each other, and then we can't we can't verify it if it's what they're telling is true or not. We just have to go by their words, and that is the big problem, I would say. I think the
That must
government at the moment,
I must admit,
yeah.
I don't know Mongolian politics at all, other than its general reputation. But you've mentioned the opposition. I mean, to what extent do you have a figure like Mandela or Navalny, or an opposition leader, clean hands, who's been anti-corruption, transparency, that kind of agenda? Does that exist?
No, that's the biggest issue with Mongolia, is that we as a country have an idolized a person like Chinggis Khan for a very long time, and then we he's like a mythical figure in our country, and we also talk about having that kind of a person come back to us basically, but that person never ever like
So
materialized.
a strong,
All
enlightened leader, is that the idea?
Yes, exactly,
Benevolent dictator.
yes, and we still have not seen that. And some people say we have that, but all the people that were kind of emulating his imagery, or wanted to show that strong men were all had like basically have dirty hands, or just did not really show that kind of a competence into the crowd, where they can exuberate, that can have some kind of connection with the regular people, in a sense. And the opposition party, they could have became that people where they could have been opposing, like they did when Mongolia became a democracy in the early 90s. But they squabbled that repetition early in the 90s and into the 2000s, and now they're just basically are the issue of Mongolia, where they cause all these corruptions, all these injustices in the country. So there's just no sense of like an opposition that can be, as you said, like Navalny or like Zelensky, that can show to the people that they can trust. Basically, there's no like a strong leader that can say like, this is the person we should follow. This is the person that is directing us into the right direction. And when I was at the square, looking at the protesters, they wanted that sense of leadership from somebody. And there was one a particular person who's a local comedian, but he's also has a quite of a bad track record of working with politicians, working in their election campaigns. So he has that smeared image of himself. So there's just no one person that can be like a good leader in Mongolia that Mongolians can look up to and say like, that person will lead us into a
So
just
the
society.
demonstrations, like many of the demonstrations we've seen across the space, they're effectively leaderless. I mean, it's social media
Yes.
and, they're organically organized. And you haven't got anything like in Belarus, they had Nexta, a channel that in effect became a leader, but it was just a very effective Telegram channel where this amorphous body of people could respond to where the police were going and react immediately. And that sort of tied it together and gave the demonstrations a life of its own. And it gave it a sort of this herd mentality or hive mentality, so that it was actually became intelligent. You don't have that, or is it similar there?
No, we don't have that. Is that, as you said, that next they used Telegram, other social media platforms very successfully. But Mongolia is essentially we lack a lot of media literacy,
Mm.
and most of the information we gather is from Facebook. Facebook is basically our internet, so all the information that we gather is mainly on Facebook. And a lot of the media organizations here, I talked about it, how if you want to see the demonstrations live, you have to go on Facebook. You can't find it on any of the local media organizations on their websites, where they should broadcast also, but they don't. And just every information is consolidated on Facebook, and it's just very difficult to people to like organize or to have like a way to spread
Yeah,
information or to like
Facebook's
give.
not reactive enough. I mean, the beauty of Telegram was that, is the Telegram channels Nectar was that it was immediate
Yes.
and it was spread as well. I mean, one person would read the message and then everybody around them would react, and they could literally say, "Don't go down that road. The police are at the end of it. Turn right here," and the crowd
Yeah.
would move. I mean, it really was a remarkable thing to watch. In terms of the corruption, I mean, all of these mining assets, they're basically all state owned, aren't they? So there's not much in the way of private enterprise in the big resource sector where the money is.
Well, there is private mining companies, but they still owe like taxes to the government. But yeah, the biggest mining organizations, the companies, are basically state owned, and that is also the biggest issue with Mongolia, is that a lot of the scandals and a lot of the political upheaval stems from these mining companies, like our copper mining company ITNIT into the north was the catalyst into it was basically the catalyst of assassination of our one of uh, uh, um, the magpie of democracy, who was assassinated in the 1998 in the 1998, where he wanted to shift Mongolia into a more social democracy, and I think a lot of people didn't like that and want to have Mongolia to be a capitalist democracy, but there's just that was just that mining company was basically the uh, where he wanted to investigate that company and to do a lot of things within it to make it more profitable for the public, not for just few
Uh,
individuals. And we still don't have a lot of information from that from that mining company at all. And a lot of people talk about a lot of the rich people in Mongolia have became rich using that mining company for their own benefits.
So it's a typical, resource dependent economic setup. And on top of
Yes.
that, you've got very typical opposition, which has been riven by egos and infighting, which again, we've seen that in Russia too. They've made themselves ineffective. To what extent is the whole sort of privatization, transparency on the agenda for the government? Because if we're looking around the world, everyone's now talking, it used to be about corporate governance and listing, but now it's become ESG and people, even in somewhere as authoritarian as Russia, the ESG agenda is now very firmly fixed in the minds of companies, and they're introducing not just corporate governance and IFRS accounts because that helps their share price and makes them richer, but also
Mm.
the social stuff is there and the ecological stuff is there. Have you begun that journey, and are there plans to privatize like there are elsewhere?
So the cabinet secretary actually told the press today that they will move towards to making the mine that was in all of the scandals in this town into a more public company, not a government entity, and it will start selling shares in the international stock exchange where they can have some kind of accountability, where they can have some kind of monitoring, basically,
Mm.
and no kind of entity would be involved, and they could actually have some kind of accountability.
So, is there actually going to be any change here? I mean, the government's clearly had a shock, and but there's no way that the population can force this through. I mean, in the West, you vote them out of office, and people would be worried for
Yes,
their jobs. But from what you
yes.
say, it doesn't sound like that's really a concern. They're just trying to, I don't know, sit this out, wait for it to die down. Is that the strategies that you're feeling?
I think that is a strategy at the moment. And for the people they're naming, as I mentioned, most of them are from the opposition party. So that basically squelches any kind of opposition that would come into the elections in next election cycle. So just giving a lot of mistrust to the opposition party. So they just trying to basically find a way to make themselves look good in this particular issue.
When are the next
And
elections?
so the next elections it will be in 2024,
Okay,
so 2 years from now.
a while away.
So yeah, a while away.
And do you
And
think
I
there's
think
any? Go on.
yeah, I think that this issue will be will be at the forefront of
Mm.
that election. But a lot of people joke about how Mongolians don't have a good sense of memory and they forget everything they said in a day or two.
And there's no chance of some sort of color revolution here, where like in Kyrgyzstan, people take things into their own hands and storm the parliament, and the president flees, and suddenly they elect whoever to take over.
Not at this moment, not at this moment. But one of the things that I think from the countries from like in Central Asia is that Mongolia is still a democracy, and we had our government, even though they are not very transparent, they still have not done anything that is egregious to the protesters in any way, like really terrible in any way, like other
It's
countries
been
have.
peaceful. There's not been much violence. I mean, there's been
No, no.
scuffles at the beginning, but they didn't send the riot police in, did they?
No, no, they haven't. So that's the benefit of this protest.
And the moods in the street, I mean, again, the posters that pictures you included in your piece, I mean, it looks like people are very angry, but not to the sense where they're radicalized and the protests could become violent.
No, not at this moment. Maybe I'm wrong, but I haven't seen that. A lot of the protesters, they've encouraged peace, and this protest is one of the biggest protests, and then one of the most like organic protests I've seen.
Hmm.
And It was similar to the protests that happened in April earlier of this year, where people were basically angry at the same issues of inequality and very poor living standards. But I, most of the protests were peaceful. They're helpful to each other. But this protest, I think, things are getting worse
Mm.
because in April there were a few people who wanted to like to storm the government palace, but a lot of them like stopped them. They just immediately like stopped them like at their tracks, and just like don't
Mm.
do it. But this time there was just more people. They're just angry, and they've they tried to storm the government palace and destroy the fences around it. So I think if there isn't any kind of like change or any kind of progress made that can make people happy, I think we will see another of these, and and at that time, I think things will be much worse.
So tell me, I mean, let's step back a bit and what's actually gone wrong with Mongolia? Because I mean, we've been reporting on it, for I don't know, what the whole 16 years that we've been doing this at BNE.
Mm,
However, Mongolia really came onto the radar in 2011 with the Oyu Tolgoi the mine, together with Rio Tinto, and
mm,
biggest investment ever made into Mongolia, and huge copper gold deposit, which is actually up and running now. And at the time, everyone got super excited because the predictions were that what happened in Azerbaijan when they connected it to the oil pipeline, and the cash literally started
mm,
flowing through that pipeline. And Azerbaijan grew at 35% for several years. I mean, it became this huge star. And
mm.
everybody was predicting the same thing would happen to Mongolia when the OT mine came online, and it just didn't happen. I mean,
Yes.
it's not doing badly, but and it's in production, but these floods of money that were going to transform the country. What went wrong?
Uh, a lot of things went wrong with the Oitla as just I think if I talk about it, would take another episode. But for just basically again, corruption scandals of politicians getting bribed from maybe Ayutthaya or from the Rio Tinto, we still don't know, and bad deals, and also like insider trading, all those kind of things just mess things up, and also. Uh, we uh, and there was a case of we jailed one of the I think the I'm getting I might be getting his I need to get his name right. One of the people who were involved in the early stages of Ayutthaya, he was actually jailed, and I think that gave a lot of a sour taste maybe in like foreign investors, and we also passed a lot of laws that made it very difficult for foreign investors to actually do business in the minerals sector. That and Basically we just clamped on the mineral sector that we will not become like any other like a colonial country in that was get exploited in the past. So
To what
that
extent?
was
Do you think? I mean, if you do you know the Kumtor gold mine in Kyrgyzstan, and you make it sound very similar to that. That was a Canadian company, put a lot of money into building this one gold mine in Kyrgyzstan. Kyrgyzstan has nothing else
mm,
to go for it, and it's just become plagued with politics and interference. And in
mm.
the end, the new government, just nationalized it. You make it sound as like a similar sort of story that it should have been literally a gold mine in this case too, and it's failed to become that because of bad management, bad organization.
Yes, that's basically what happened, and just a lot of losing of faith in foreign investment, basically.
Mm.
Uh, since the oil and in 2011, moving on, a lot of the locals have complained, mainly herders complained that their lands have been degraded, their water sources have depreciated because of mining, and also because of that, it amplified a lot of nationalist views, and a lot of nationalist groups came to like destroy uh, like mining exploration sites, or like mining like initial mining projects. So that just like deters a lot of things, and we were trying to bring that back up, but still it's still not a good shape at the
Mm.
moment.
The last topic in the last 5 minutes is you've mentioned inequality several times, and we've written about the herders, and it really is. If you go to UB, then it really is remarkable. I mean, you've got the Chinese built office block in the center, but at the back is all these people living in yurts, and the herders. People still live this nomadic, medieval life almost in their yurts, wandering around the country with their cattle. And the disparity between, sort of modern Mongolia, Ulaanbaatar, and this traditional life. But nevertheless, we've got all these resources, and the coal is going out, and the copper is being produced. I mean, economically, doesn't that mean that you've got a positive current account balance, that cash is coming into the country that it could be invested, and hospitals, schools, etc., could be built, or is that money
Yes.
just not there?
Well, all the profits. So say some of the profits of in some mining regions where they will allocate the money into to the provincial budget or like fund, but most of the time the money is just nowhere to be found, and most of the time what happens is that the local governors make shady deals with mining companies, and they take all of the profits basically, and leave nothing for the local people. And again, that also plays into the current situation, that the Mongolian public have a very low trust with public officials, because they are the ones who're supposed to be working for the people, but in the end, they're basically working for these mining companies at the moment. And sometimes, even if they even if they are working for the mining companies, they should be transparent about it, but they aren't. So that's one of the biggest issues, that they're not transparent. They're mainly in it for themselves, to get rich for themselves, and for and our like system of not having, like, basically our country have left the herders into their own hands, and because of that, they've been dominated by the market system, where they've raised more goats, and not have like a diverse field of animals, and because of that, a lot of land degradations have happened because of their own like raising way too much goats. So there's just like a lot of issues with that basically.
Well, hopefully this has provided the impetus for the government to make some changes, improve transparency, and that the people will be better looked after. Look, we're out of time, and thank you very much for taking the time to join us. It's fascinating, and we'll check in again as things develop. Hopefully it'll get better.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And for those of you watching, I hope you enjoyed this. As I say, we intend to do this more often, talk to our correspondents in the various countries that we cover when they get hot. You can see this video again on our YouTube channel. That's bne IntelliNews. And you can also find links to that. And I recommend you sign up to Editor's Picks, our daily email digest. You can find links to do all of these things at bne.eu/welcome. Until next time, thanks again for joining us.